Welcome, welcome, welcome to Brother Nature, this week's edition of Environment, Great Lakes, and all things wildlife. You are getting a live shot at Drummond Island. That is the temporary ice bridge that you can actually take to Canada if you were to brave the elements all the way up in the eastern side of the UP. I'll have a lot more to say about that next week when we get a little more involved. For now, though, I'm your host, Jack Nissen, and I'm so excited to be with everybody today. We're going to be talking about one thing that probably is enjoying the weather a little bit more than we are, the snowy owl. Yes, and here with me is Jeff Nedwick, who actually runs the tours actually around Metro Detroit. What is this, Michigan Snowy Owl Tours, LLC? Do I have that right?
That's it.
Jeff, actually, let's start. What is a snowy owl?
Well, what is a snowy owl? If you've seen the Harry Potter movies, the
Yes.
most famous snowy
Yes.
owl of all, Hedwig, is a lot of people know snowy owls just from watching that movie. And that popularity is kind of helped the birds, I guess, to some extent, because now they can get a sense for what the bird looks like, and actually seeing them on the shoulder of a character in a movie is a lot different than trying to spot one out in the field and from 100 yards away or more.
Yeah, so, I mean, you kind of got that iconic white or maybe, what is it, kind of like white and black spots on the wings, right?
Well, it depends if it's a male or female. So it's not always easy to identify the males and females. The only ones for sure that you can see, the ones that are solid white, the ones that you see the brilliant photographs of all the time, those are adult male birds. They're a little smaller than the females, but they're the only ones that you can absolutely be sure what you're looking at when you see one that's completely white with no spots on it at all. The others are either adult females and immature ones, first-year birds that are just down here for the first time down here in southern Michigan. They'll have a lot of specks, a lot of spots and blotching on them. So it's always good anything in between there can be a challenge to identify, but the all-white ones are adult males. The heavily spotted ones are immatures, and anything in between could either be an adult male or an immature male, adult female. It's harder to tell.
So actually, let's kind of get just an idea. When you're talking about owls and specifically snowy owls, how long do they live? Where do they nest? And what are they doing when they're coming down here to Michigan?
Oh, great questions. So how long do they live? They live probably 7-8 years in the wild. I think why they're here, they're native to the Arctic region, so they live in the North Pole, for lack of a better description, and they nest up there in the springtime on the ground. There's no trees up there or anything, which partially explains why they come down to certain parts of Michigan. Specifically, the Thumb area is one area that's really good. The eastern UP is another area that's really good because it's pretty flat and open down there. Another part that's not so good that they're drawn to are airports. In fact, there's some at the Grand Rapids airport as we speak that they're having to deal with out there because they're sitting there right on the side of the runway, and they're not doing anybody any favors there.
So actually, it is funny. I've heard that they're sort of drawn to airports, and there's often a lot of monitoring of them at airports. Is there any reason why they prefer those areas?
It just looks like the Arctic tundra that they're familiar with. They think of what any picture you've ever seen of the tundra. There's no trees. It's just barren, flat lands, and so they're attracted to any place that looks like that. They're attracted and adapted to that. So they have tremendous eyesight. They can spot a mouse from a football field away running across the ground. And they just park themselves out on the flattest spot that they can find and just look in 360 degrees searching for food.
And talk about food. What exactly do they like to eat?
Well, when they're up in their native habitat, it's exclusively lemmings. We don't have any lemmings down here, but we do have an assorted buffet of many other things that they find attractive, like ducks, for example. They eat a lot of ducks. There's a lot of mice that they eat here. Voles, muskrats in the Thumb area are pretty prevalent. So there's lots of alternatives to lemmings when they come down here.
But lemmings, of course, are their only sort of diet up when they are actually hanging out in the Arctic. Is that because that's the primary food source that's available to them?
Pretty much all there is up there, yeah. And there's ducks up there too. And some snowy owls never migrate down here. They stay up there all winter long, and they'll just park themselves out on an ice shelf floating around in the ocean looking for ducks. And that's a good alternative. Lemmings are so important to them because that's what determines really how many owls we see here in Michigan and in southern Michigan specifically. So when the lemming populations fluctuate up and down quite a bit, when there's a boon in lemming populations, that means more young snowy owls survive, and when more young snowy owls survive, there's more to disperse. They have to disperse further because they're territorial.
Yeah, I actually will have an interview later in the show that kind of talks about that sort of cyclical nature that the owls follow as far as the lemming population goes as well.
Yeah.
So speaking specifically about you and snowy owls, are they your favorite owl? What exactly about that bird has drawn you to them?
It's more than my favorite owl. They're probably my favorite animal. I mean, it's just spectacular. Setting aside for a moment the stunning appearance and the look, it's just, they present a rare opportunity to interact with a wild animal in its native habitat. So they live in the Arctic, so they haven't learned to be afraid of people yet. Maybe they should. Maybe in the long run that'll benefit them. But for now, they're very approachable. So you can drive up next to a snowy owl sitting on a telephone pole and just observe it, and it'll just look at you once in a while. And I caution people all the time on my tours, be very careful. We don't want to interfere with the owl's hunting. We don't want to disrupt it in any way. We just sit quietly, observe it, take your picture, and then move on.
And you, of course, are pretty well adept when it comes to trying to spot these guys. You run a tour service. I'm assuming you are a tour guide extraordinaire.
Extraordinaire might be.
Yeah. When it comes to actually trying to look for these guys, what are you trying to do? What are you looking for? Where are you looking for them? Tell us about that.
So the easiest time is when there's no snow on the ground. Unfortunately, it's winter in Michigan, and there's a lot of snow most of the times in the winter. But on those occasions when the ground is bare, you can spot a snowy owl out in the field, probably a quarter mile away, because it's just this big white blob sitting out in a dark field. The other time is good when there's no wind. They tend to sit on telephone poles and structures, barns, traffic signs, anything like that. The hardest time is on a windy day when the ground is covered with snow, because the birds tend to stay on the ground more. Then it gets tough. You got to look for shadows and profiles, and it's harder to do. I take people on the tours, and I spend the first half hour just coaching them on what to look for. You look for a profile that looks out of place. Look for a shadow that's in the snow. You might not see the white bird, but you might see the shadow that white bird's casting, and then you can actually focus in on the bird. And then once you've kind of figured out where it is, you grab your binoculars or your camera and get a picture of it and confirm it.
And then I'm really interested then when it comes to, what are people's reactions when they see these guys? Because, just looking at a photo of this thing, it's so beautiful.
It is. People that have never seen one before, it's just amazing to them. Well, and we're fortunate. Now, last year was better. We saw, up to 10 on a trip, but this year it's been a little tougher. 1 to 6 birds, I think we've seen a couple of times. So it's just, when you finally see one, it's just, they're just breathless almost. People just go, oh my God, I can't believe that. And we had an encounter on the last tour we took, where we actually saw 2 owls defending their territory. So one of them had infringed upon the other's territory, and they actually got into a battle right over the vehicle and started, locking claws and talons and rolling around in the air. It was, and of course, nobody had a camera ready when that happened, but it was stunning to watch nonetheless.
Yeah, that's usually how it goes. Yeah. You're trying to get the best moment, of course, is when nobody's rolling. But of course, maybe that's sort of the beauty of it, is that this stuff is so fleeting and so natural that it only really happens when you're not looking, Well,
that's part of the allure of the whole tour. As you get to it, you don't know what you're going to see. You don't know. You might go up there, you drive around all day, and maybe see one. You might drive around and see 10, but you never know exactly what the situation is going to be. They might be, hunting, actively hunting, propped up on a sign or a telephone pole, looking around. You can tell when they're hunting. They're wide awake, heads rotating around. Or they could be snoozing. They're diurnal, so they can kind of nap all day long, cat nap all day, and wake up later in the day. But you'll catch them just out there kind of, half asleep, their eyes half closed, just kind of looking around. Once in a while, they'll open their eyes to look at you, go back to sleep. But all of that is part of the allure of just being able to sit there and interact with a bird like that.
And then I'm interested when it comes to sound, noise. Can you describe for me what it sounds like when they're calling and when they're singing?
Yeah, also, full disclosure, I've never heard one at this time of year. I'm sure they do, but when I see them in the winter here in Michigan, they're not making any noise. One time I think I heard one and it sounded a lot like a red-tailed hawk when it screeched, but other than that, that was one sighting out of hundreds that I've seen. The rest of them are just sitting there quietly.
All right. So, Jeff, for people who want to take a tour with you, to go and see these guys, what's the best way to do that?
Best way is go to visit. I have a website, michigansnowyowls.com. Can't get any plainer than that. Just go to the site, just take a browse around, look at the pictures of the birds that we've taken, other birds as well that we'll see up there, not just snowy owls, but so the website's full of pictures, and there's a way to contact me directly through that website.
Okay. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for joining us here on Brother Nature.
It was my pleasure. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. We're going to have a whole lot more on these guys. We've got a really cool interview with someone who's quite the ornithologist and naturalist, as well as some audio recordings of the sounds these guys actually make as well. That's coming up after the break. And we are back. And yes, this week we're talking about snowy owls, a pretty elusive creature. Although if you know where to look, as Jeff Nedwick just told us, you can find them. That's, of course, with the tours that he will give, as well as apparently airports and telephone poles. They're pretty common guys. They're actually not concerned about, disappearing from you as well. They don't know to be worried about you. We did get a couple of really interesting audio clips. This is out of the Macaulay Library at the Cornell Ornithology Lab. First audio call we got from you is actually the call of a snowy owl. Take a listen. That's the call from the snowy owl. And then, of course, we actually have a song from them as well. This is also from the same library. Here, take a listen. Both of those things I actually think were from Russia. These guys like to nest in the most furthest northern areas, specifically around Alaska, northern Canada, and then Russia as well. Now, coming up, right now, we got a really cool interview with you. I met with, what's his name? Scott Weidenhall. He is a naturalist and an author with a Pulitzer nomination, actually. He runs Project Snowstorm. This is pretty much the premier tracking tool for snowy owls. Take a listen.
In the winter of 2013-2014, we in the East and the Great Lakes saw the biggest invasion of snowy owls since at least the winter of 1926, 1927, and possibly as far back as the 1890s. And I mean, there were literally thousands of snowy owls that came pouring across the border from Canada into the eastern United States and the upper Midwest. You tend to get these sort of cyclical eruptions. About every 3.5 to 5 years, you get a wave of snowy owls coming south, and that's tied to the roughly 4-year population cycle in lemmings in the Arctic. So you get a good breeding year, get a lot of young owls coming south.
I guess I'm curious about the novelty of the project that you guys have instituted. I know you said it's the largest right now. Has there ever been a period of time where we've learned so much about snowy owls?
The novelty was actually studying these birds on these more southerly landscapes that they're inhabiting with people and trying to get a better sense of what threats they're facing when they're down here. In like May, June, July of 2013, there had been an extraordinary peak in the lemming population in the Ungava Peninsula of northern Quebec. And We don't know how they do this, but somehow or other, snowy owls know where there's going to be lemmings. And snowy owls gathered in large numbers in the Angava Peninsula, and they had babies. Boy, did they have babies. Like as many as 9 chicks per nest. And all of those young owls, fat, healthy owls, headed south that winter. These birds just came pouring south across the border. And a buddy of mine with whom I've been doing saw-whet owl research for years called me up and said, listen, none of us are going to live long enough to see something like this again. We need to try to mobilize and get as much information about this as possible. In all, that first winter, we tagged 22 snowy owls, and we were off to the races. And we've been doing it ever since. And so since 2013, 2014, we've tagged, at this point, about 117 snowy owls in 17 states and Canadian provinces. And it is now easily the largest snowy owl telemetry, sort of movement data set in the world. We didn't set out to do that. It just kind of all happened by accident. But it's been really cool. So that launched Project Snowstorm in places like Arctic Scandinavia, where winter climates have changed. What had been these like regular metronomic boom bust cycles of lemmings have flatlined. Lemmings are still there, but they're not rising to these high levels, and because of that, snowy owls are no longer breeding in those areas.
Besides the lemming factor, what about just a warming climate? Is that a pressure on owls as well, snowy owls specifically?
You can argue that snowy owls are one of the 4 or 5 species that are at greatest and most immediate risk from climate change. They breed at the absolute northernmost parts of the northern hemisphere. They have nowhere further north to go as the climate warms and changes. Up until about 15 years ago, the population estimate worldwide was about 300,000 individual snowy owls. The more recent population estimates, and this is backed up with some genetic work that kind of gives you an ability to judge overall population size. Instead of 300,000 snowy owls, the global population is probably between 14,000 and 28,000 individual breeding age owls. If you start adding all the pressures that they're hitting when they come south from cars and planes and environmental toxins and highly pathogenic avian influenza, it gets to the point that it scares you pretty badly as to what the future holds for these birds.
Again, that was Scott Whitensaw. He's a naturalist and an author who's been studying these things for a long, long time. And then, of course, I would pitch anybody who's interested in seeing more and learning more about these guys to go to Project Snowstorm. That is basically tracking every snowy owl they've ever tagged. It's still going around right now. I also want to add that he does have a new book out called Oyster Catcher, or rather Return of the Oyster Catcher. That actually has a few sort of success stories when it comes to birds, but I would anticipate it being a pretty good read. Coming up after the break, we got a whole lot more looking forward to this weekend, as well as a couple other fun stories on the way. Stay here for more. And welcome back to Brother Nature. So, you don't have to go very far if you want to enjoy all the fun offerings that winter has to have here in Metro Detroit. Actually, you don't even have to leave Metro Detroit specifically. You can even go to Plymouth, where the annual Ice Festival is going on with some really cool ice carvings.
Welcome to the Plymouth Ice Festival presented by Michigan First Credit Union. I'm James Eaton. I'm the festival organizer here for the festival. And you're in downtown Plymouth. It's really a magical weekend down here with all the snow and beautiful temperatures for ice carving. You're gonna see this dinosaur. You're gonna see all different kinds of animals. We have an excavator for the little boys that like cars and trucks. We'll have an excavator. There's a whole interactive area where we have checkers and shuffleboard. Cornhole will be going on in there. All this stuff is made out of ice. So there's lots of interactive spots where you're able to kind of get up close and personal with the ice.
Using the Stegosaurus actually as an example, how much time would it take to do that? And how do you get the details in? I don't know how the big chunks are carved versus maybe the small chunks.
So this carving was actually really cool. They did it in a couple of different pieces. If you look, it's kind of like there's a base which is down lower. that they build on the ground there. And the Michigan First logo part of it was actually done in a studio where they could use a CNC machine to cut out the actual logo. And then the top part was built here in two pieces, and they actually take a forklift and they pick it up and set it on top of there. So it was a team of
That's
ice carvers
awesome.
that did this one. It probably took them 8 hours yesterday to get to almost a completed status. Some of the
Well, he
smaller
was
ice
so
carvings,
helpful,
the
too.
one block kind of
He was
stuff,
so
might only
accessible.
take an hour or an hour or two, depending on what it is. There's two ways we decide what ice carvings are going to be. One we call artist choice, and it's just when the sponsor says, "Yeah, we don't care what it is, just make it cool," and we leave that up to the artist to be able to come up with whatever they'd like to. Another way is when a sponsor of a piece wants to have some input, maybe they want to connect it to their brand a little bit. They'll give us some input, and then we go back and forth with the carvers to make that happen for them. Ice carving, it takes obviously frozen water. It's about 350 pounds per block of ice. They come in from a manufacturer in Ohio. We'll have about 350 blocks throughout downtown Plymouth this weekend. And then the ice carvers stack them up into, if you just look over here, there's an ice carving of a dinosaur here. That's 25 blocks of ice that they put together to make happen. So you have everything from one block all the way up to 25 blocks of ice carvings.
Those blocks of ice, those are 300 pounds. And they actually shipped 350 of them in from Ohio. I have to imagine it's a pretty fun industry to work in. And of course, there's always need for more carving. And turns out Plymouth actually has a world-renowned ice carver themselves. I have to imagine it'd be a pretty fun interview. I might try to snag that coming up. And finally, I did actually step outside of Michigan and the Great Lakes. This is out of the United Nations. They have actually declared an era of global water bankruptcy. They're using that word actually because hopefully people might resonate more with the financial expectation and definition of it. But due to chronic groundwater depletion, water over allocation, land and soil degradation, deforestation, pollution, as well as global warming, we are entering a sort of a new era when it comes to available water. Instead of using the terms water stress and water crisis, they actually say that it fails to resonate with people. Just something to keep in mind. That's everything for us here at Brother Nature this week. So happy to have all of you here, and I'll definitely see you next week. Coming up next is Live Now. Thank you.